I had a buddy message me a few weeks ago, and I had been following you a little bit on Facebook. Considering where I'm coming from in my journey, I don't know, with how my intuition is, I just really vibe on a deep level. I see your posts and I kind of get a feeling of people's intentions and people's motives behind their posts. And what I really got from your post there, probably I'd say maybe May, was
Mhm.
like surrender was like the main thing that I was getting from your post. And so I had this buddy message me a few weeks ago, and he was like, dude, have you talked to Aubrey? And I was like, no, man, I haven't talked to her at all. And he's like, bro, you need to have her on the podcast. And I was like, dude, I've been thinking about that for a while. I just don't really know how to approach it, but there's something different. And I absolutely agree with you. So then I sent you that screenshot of him messaging me that, and then you just
Okay.
like went in and just like told me this incredible story, bro. And what was relevant about it is my life is a full of synchronicities. It's full of different types of connections. Something will happen in left field and I can make a connection to it at first base type
Yeah.
thing happen. So like you were telling me about this story that had happened to you, and it was eerily similar to my own experience that I had with God, but you had achieved it in a totally different way. And so what I want to do is I want you to tell me about the time that you died, man, and like what happened there. I want to draw my connections to what I experienced too, because when you were telling me these things, all I could think of was we've come from the same background in what we believe, what we're told to believe, and then we experience something totally different. Then we have the realization after the fact, well, it's kind of what I believe, but so much more
Yeah.
than what you could have ever told me. I just want to go from where you want to start with your story and go from there, man. But thank you for coming on and letting me have you on here for sure.
Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess to preface this, I haven't really shared much of this story with anyone really up until this point because I've felt like on a very deep level, it's just not time yet. You know what I mean? And so I feel like with all of the things kind of going on in my life and like you were talking about different connections kind of being made, there were many indicators outwardly and inwardly over the last week, really, that was like, okay, it's culminating, it's coming together, and it's about that time. We can rewind back to March of this year, which is kind of where everything, the whole show went down. At the time, I was strung out on fentanyl, which, I've struggled most of my adult life with addiction. If it wasn't one thing, it was another. That's normally how the story goes with us addicts. But by the time that March came, I was at a whole new low, completely strung out on fentanyl, and just I was at that crux of, am I gonna die in this? This is it for me, or am I going to give it one more fighting chance? So I was like, okay, if I'm going to do anything like detoxes in the past, I'd go through detox and I'd be good for a few days or a couple of weeks or even a month or two and then go right back to it. And I knew with everything in me, like if I didn't do something, like that would be me. I would die in my addiction. And there's a little piece of me that was holding on to hope that I wasn't going to do that. So I called my parents and asked them if I could drive out and detox in the van that I was living in at the time. And they were like, okay, but there can't be any drama out here. You can park
Hmm.
in the driveway and detox in the van. And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, yeah, I can definitely do that. So I got a hold of a handful of Xanax to help my detox. And drove out here, and I'm telling you, the 2-hour drive that it takes to get from where I was living in out on the street in Dallas, out here to where my parents live. It's a 2-hour drive. And that took probably 8.5 hours to get here. I mean, it was just
Golly.
like one thing after the next. And I mean, you know how it goes.
Yeah,
And
especially on Xanax. And what's
yeah.
funny is when this last time that I got sober, I also detoxed with Xanax, which was kind of ironic. I was trying to get off alcohol and then getting off of the Xanax after the alcohol, which
Yeah.
almost killed me too.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And mind you, there was nothing wrong with the vehicle at the time. It was just,
Just
oh
side
wait, I
quests. You
can't
were
do
just on
this.
side quests.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I finally get here and proceed into trying to detox myself. And 48 hours in, the Xanax was gone, and I'm no longer like, sleeping, with the help of that Xanax. I kind of come to the realization like, this is, what did I get myself into? Like, I mean, the cold sweats. I mean, just, I felt like I was like dying from the inside out, you know? And I was like, okay, just go back to sleep. Just go back to sleep. I probably went back to sleep for about 10 hours. But when I woke up from that point, like, I knew something was very wrong. I could literally see like my chest, like my heart, like, and I got enough strength to go inside, and my dad was the only one home at the time. And I went inside. My van was completely on empty, but I had decided like, no, I'm gonna go back to Dallas. I can't do this. I don't have it in me. And I went inside and I told my dad, I said, look, Dad, I hate to do this to you, but I need gas. And it would help if I could have some money too, because I'm gonna die if I don't go back to Dallas. And he was like, Aubrey, you should really go to a doctor. You look horrible. And I was like, no, it's fine. I'll be fine once I get to Dallas. I have to get well. And it was this whole exchange in the living room, and I could see literally my dad's heart, like just being torn into shreds, and putting him in the position of like, he didn't know what to do, but also trying to show me that tough love. And I followed him up to the little gas station here, and he filled up my van. I get on the road. My phone was dead. I was just gonna white knuckle it the 2 hours back to Dallas and just pray to God that I made it. And mind you, the van had 0 brakes at the time. No brakes, no e-brake, no nothing. And I am like in no position, I mean, physically, to make a 2-hour drive with 0 brakes and lots of red lights and, all of this stuff. And so, so Jacksboro is the first town that you hit on the way back to Dallas, and it's exactly 12 miles away from where I live. And it was so crazy. I'm on my way to Jacksboro, sick as hell, and I noticed like vultures circling what looks like just right above the van, and it's like they followed me the whole way, the
Yeah.
whole 12 miles. I know this sounds crazy. And then, I noticed a street sign, and it says like Dark Corner Road, and I'm just like, okay, this is weird, and then there's a crossroads right there in Jacksboro. And if you go right, it takes you all the way to Dallas. And then for the first time ever, I noticed on the left-hand side of the road, a big hospital sign. I was like, I don't know where the hospital is, but it was like right then and there. I just had this overwhelming feeling that if I go left, I can go get help, go find this hospital, something, put this in God's hands. If I go right, I'm going to die. Dallas equals death. It was like at that time, that's what, completely, I mean, there was no escaping like that decision. And then I thought, I get back to Dallas, I die under a bridge somewhere. My family will never find me. They'll never know where to look. They'll never hear from me again. And I just couldn't stomach, my daughters not knowing where mom is, and not being able to find me, anything. And so I was like, at that moment, I was just like, God, I'm turning left. and I went towards the hospital side. And I didn't make it very far, and I started feeling like my chest tightening. And so I just kind of frantically pull into this little local grocery store and come to a rolling stop, like put it down in like second gear, come to a rolling stop. I just remember, like, I'm not at the hospital. How am I going to get out of this? You know what I mean? It was just that battle of like, I think I can control this. I think that, I can make these moves to get done what I need to get done, or I could just be here and see what happens. But I was really aware of that in that parking lot. And I yelled out the window. I said, "Can someone call an ambulance?" And I don't remember much after that. I do remember waking up in the back of an ambulance for a very brief time period, and then like feeling like everything under me was shaking. And then everything just stopped. It's strange. But from that point, now this is all things that I was caught up to speed by my parents and other family members. I was care flighted from that point because I had started having seizures and aspirated, and my lungs collapsed. And they care flighted me. And they said whenever I got to the hospital, it was just kind of a real frantic situation. And they said that I had been down for a while. So I was put on a ventilator and was there, not initiating any breaths for myself for 5 days. They couldn't figure out like why I wouldn't be like, initiating those breaths, and had pretty much tried everything up until that point, other than like medically drowning me, which was the next to last thing that they were going to try. But during those 5 days, and it's wild because it's like, I woke up at like 5.5 days, just like, what, where am I? Because I feel like I've been everywhere in this whole time period. You know what I mean? And I've had several visions and felt like I was at different places. And at one point I was in the hospital room, but I wasn't even aware that I was in the hospital yet, like in the waking world. So
you were in your hospital room before you were in the hospital?
No. So while I was on the ventilator, and completely like unconscious, like
Okay.
I had a vision of being in the hospital room, like standing up against the wall, looking at myself in the hospital bed.
Oh, like an out of body experience.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your soul was out of your body.
Yes. That's what I believe. And then there was another point where I was aware that I could go anywhere that I wanted. And then if I wanted to come back to the hospital room, I guess I could, but didn't really want to, I guess you can say. And this transpired within those 5 days before I wakingly woke up. You know what I mean? Like consciously woke up and knew that, oh, hold on, I'm in a hospital room, So it was,
You mentioned that you were pretty much living in your van.
yes.
And you were on your way to the hospital, and the last thing that you recall was asking somebody to call 911. And then from there is what your parents and everybody else recollect. But from that point, you don't know what had happened. So from that point, though, were you still, like, whenever you had, I guess that you had went unconscious physically, you were still in that van, though, like interdimensionally, like subconsciously, I guess you could say.
Yeah. From what I gather, from the time that I asked someone to call 911 and then passed out to the point where I woke up briefly in the back of the ambulance, which that's a really funny story. They couldn't I guess they were trying to run an IV on me and couldn't find a vein. It's like typical addict stuff, but they couldn't find a vein, and were performing an interosseous, which is where they basically like screw an IV into your bone, in your shin bone, and that was enough to like snap me out and bring me back for a moment. It felt like I got shot in the leg with a nail gun.
Yeah, for sure.
It was horrible.
You
And
felt that
then,
for sure.
yeah. but in the middle of, the ambulance showing up and then getting me out of my van, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there for that, if that makes sense.
Well, you said the last thing that you remember was being in the ambulance and like it shaking under you,
Yeah.
and then what happened?
I guess that at that point, I wasn't aware that I was having seizures, but that's about the point where I lose. But I guess I was going into a seizure and just lost consciousness at that point. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And then I wasn't, consciously aware of my physical surroundings until 5.5 days later. Yeah. And this
But
whole showdown happened on my birthday this year. So
when's your birthday?
March 31st.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember your birthday being pretty close to mine. Mine's March 3rd. Did you come back on March 31st?
No,
Like physically?
that would have been April 4th, April 5th.
You died on your birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a synchronicity. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many little things that God was telling you, and in hindsight now, you can draw like, hey, like, look at this. Like, if this isn't crazy enough, then here's this.
Yeah.
But here's this. So you went unconscious, and what happened? What did you start to realize?
Mm. So one of the first things, I think one of the first things that I remember, and now this is like on the ventilator, you know, not waking conscious, but like while I was under, I had several very, very vivid, lifelike visions that, I mean, they've all impacted me like in some form or fashion. But I mean, it's so strange, I've always been, a super active dreamer. I remember my dreams, things of the sort, but I can't line it up with these. I mean, this is like something that I go to sleep thinking about. I wake up thinking about. I remember it as if it was this morning, as if it all, took place. And it's really strange. So
It's
kind of
as
like,
real as your most realistic memory.
yes,
Like something that you've physically done here. That's
yes,
as real as it
that,
was. It's not like a dream
no,
that you're trying to recall. It's a
no,
very physical thing that you experienced, much like going to prom.
yes,
Something
yes,
like that.
very much
Okay.
so. Very much so. And this is kind of like our discussion over the messages and everything. This is really kind of the first time that I've opened up really at any length or detail about it. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
up until this point, it's been very, very difficult to share, mainly because, I question myself. Like, this sounds crazy. But I
Yeah.
know what I
Question your own
saw. But I know
sanity.
what I saw, and I know that like when I woke up off the ventilator, there were a handful of things that I just knew, like unshakably, that I wouldn't have even, really thought about or considered before any of this.
What are those types of things?
Okay, so one of those things was knowing that by design, 100% by design, the way that each one of us are built individually, we have every single thing that we need within us to carry out our purpose here on life. You know what I mean? There is nothing outside of us that we need. For me, that was kind of like it was hard to kind of like ingest, because I'm like, well, it goes against everything that we grow up believing. Well, I need a career to do this, or I need this to do that. I need this to be successful. And that was one of the first things that I woke up and I was just like, I have everything that I need built in to literally face anything, do anything, carry out anything that is destined for me. Another one of the...
Could you say, and I just before you go on, could you say that removed fear from your life?
Yes.
Since you realized that you already had everything within you?
Yeah.
I think that's important, is
Yeah.
realizing and understanding, like,
yeah, because for a very,
fear
very
was
long
just a
time, I
thought.
mean, Jordan, I was such a fearful person. For a very long time, I would not take risks. I would not do anything that I thought wouldn't work out. That whole fear of failure, fear of fear of success, fear of
Fear.
anything. I mean, I was just consumed with it. I know through those series of visions, I mean, there was a point in time, you know, that I fully believe that I experienced hell. I fully believe that I experienced interacting with God. And in that, you know, and I fully experienced death, literally stared it in the face. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. But out of that happening, there's things that, you know, I kind of get frazzled about, but like, fear just isn't, it's not a thing, really. It's like, you know what? I know that if it is within the scope of what it is that I'm here for, there is absolutely nothing to be afraid of. Like people, places, things, nothing.
Yeah.
I can go anywhere, be around anybody, but like knowing that I have everything in my design to carry out what I'm here for in this life. You know, it's very liberating.
Yeah, when you realized that you had everything that you needed within you to be successful in this life, do you think that at some point in time in this life you had to accept something for that to happen? Do you think that you had to consciously ask for that sooner, or do you think that was something that had possibly happened before your calling, or before you even came to this earth? What I'm asking is, I've read this book called Journey of Souls, and some of the key points in it, and it's about a doctor that does hypnotherapy. What he realized was people were going before they were born, and the narrative became that like we chose this way before we were even born. But personally, I think back like when I was 6 and we had this preacher here named Brother Dixon. I'm pretty sure that you remember him. I remember him coming, even like Shady Stinnett messaged me the other day. Like, this is how crazy this.
Oh,
Yes. She was like, I'm so proud of you, bro. But like, I remember Brother Dixon coming over to Shady's house when I was 6 and talking to me about being saved. And like, what he had to say was profound. Like, he was like, you realize that like you're accepting something to come into your life. In hindsight now, when I asked that, that's when my experience, like when all the negative experiences started happening too. Like the things like the sexual molestation, being preyed upon. Like, while God was giving me gifts, there were human egos that were also preying upon God's gifts that were being bestowed upon me then. And so I realize now, did I accept it then? Did I accept a Christ then? Or did I ask to have that happen way before then? And then just in this experience is when I told it to come in. I also believe that I've been given everything within me to survive here. And it's not anything monetary. I realized that the things that I was connecting to here was keeping me at a vibration or a frequency relative to what everybody else wanted from me.
Yeah.
And that was good for their agenda. But then I realized, like, since I have everything that I already needed and God already dwelled within me because I asked God to dwell within me a long time ago,
Yeah.
and all I had to do was just truly believe in my purpose and believe in the things that I already knew that was within me to do. And like
Yeah.
hindsight, like, that's why I have a podcast. That's why, like, I look back and I was like really good at one act play, and like I was a great actor, and like I was very charismatic. All these things was setting up for me to have this platform to share this right
Yeah.
here. Say, like, God gave me all these things, and it wasn't nothing that like I really had to do because I had already been blessed with these things. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah. Definitely.
So back to my question, with knowing, do you think that you accepted that at a young age, or do you think that like you came here with all of that?
Um, I'd have to say really kind of both. Because I do believe that purpose is built within us, before that we even get here. God's plans go out way before us, before our awareness of it per se. And then when we get to a point, where we are aware of it, and then it's our choice what do we do with it. And so um I'd like to think both. I'd like to think both. Um,
Yeah,
but
I do too.
I like hearing you talk about your experience because again, like when I was really small, I don't know how old I was, but I just remember like being aware of God's presence. I could feel it, and I mean, I couldn't have been maybe 3 or 4, but I remember like being in my room and I'm playing like house or something that I just remember like just knowing like in that moment and without anybody telling me or Sunday school, like anything like that. I don't remember church at that point in my life, you know what I mean?
Was that
Um
your first conscious memory? Was you playing house like when you were 3 or 4?
um my first conscious memory was whenever I was I think between 6 and 7 months old. And my grandfather was my mom's dad. He had stage 4 lung cancer and was on hospice at home. And I think I was probably 6 or 7 months old. But I remember being handed to him in his bed. And this was just a couple weeks before he passed away. And I still remember like his face and being handed to him. It's
Mm-hmm.
wild, like having memories like that. Um, that's one of my first conscious memories. Yeah.
I also was wondering because I have my first conscious memory, and like I want to say it's when my conscious entered my body, type
Mhm.
thing. Like I've been really trying to hone in on like when like boom I landed here,
Yeah.
and I think that possibly could be different for everybody because
Yeah.
here you are speaking on that experience when you're 6 or 7 months, and I don't think that I think I might have been like 18 months, and I remember like walking down the foot of my bed and then falling, and like that
Mhm.
was like boom, falling was like when I hit, and I remember like
Mhm.
I don't know, it's weird, like dusting myself off like I've arrived, like, but
Yeah.
one thing that I've realized for sure is that there's something that's within me that's totally different than what my physical body is. And
Yes.
there's a total different energy that dwells between my brain and whatever that energy is.
Yeah.
And it's like a real high vibration, fiery type energy that I call my conscience, that I also
Mhm.
say like that's my Christ consciousness too, which
Mhm.
gives me the ability to love unconditionally. But I want to go back to this story because you told me in our messages that you recall I don't know where you were at this point. I think this was like the very first time that you had realized that you weren't here, but you were jumping from rock to rock, and you realized there was a bunch of sludge and like muck under you,
Uh-huh.
but you found yourself bounding from these rocks going towards a tunnel.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Mm.
So, so in this vision, and this is what I identify as seeing hell.
Okay.
And
And can I post these visions too?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, post them like
Sorry
I'll
about the
share the
rough drawings,
illustrations.
but
No, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. Your handwriting is like really elegant, and like it already looks like you've been like in Alice in Wonderland. Like it looks like you've been in another dimension, bro. It's crazy.
yeah, I have a lot of people that say, Aubrey, I can't read it.
No, it's kind of hard to read, but like that's it's the ambiance of what had happened. Like it's very
Yeah.
telling.
What really, okay. So this this I haven't really figured out how in the world to express or incorporate like in the drawing itself. So when I say whenever I landed in that vision, because I mean it's weird kind of how the transition between it goes, because it's not really so much like the dream world where it's like, oh, okay, I'm kind of aware that I'm falling asleep, and then wham, I'm in a dream, and then a lot of the times you're in a dream. This is more like, here I am.
Hmm.
Like boom,
Very
here I am.
consciously aware.
This is this is what's going on, and you're pretty aware of the feel. You're pretty aware of what in the world's going on. You're pretty aware of where you're at and what you know at that point. And it's so strange. There was almost what sounded like a 70s like DJ on like a old school like funk and R&B like radio station almost. And he's
Yeah.
like, we've got everything you need down here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, it was
It was
very I
really
got
creepy.
that groovy vibe too, but also
Yeah.
it shows that God has a sense of humor.
Yes, yes. And it was like,
Yes.
you know, all y'all creatures of the night, just like weird, really strange. And I just remember like being not settled. Like there is no part of my spirit or any of this, like while this is going on. But I dropped in kind of this grassy area, okay, where in the distance I could see the tunnel. I could see the bridge. I could see like the concrete landing on the side. And then I look down and I look at my feet and I'm standing on a rock. And what looks like this like mud sludge stuff is just, I mean, like almost like the movement of lava, just like really like slow, but I mean it's coming like and almost like pillowy. Like it almost looked
Mhm.
like if I were to step on it, like there would be kind of like a layer before I fell it like into it.
Yeah.
It's strange, I know. And then I started noticing that there's people like parked along that grass, and they're kind of looking at me like, is she really going over there? Like hanging out, like kind of pretending they're cool. They're like smoking cigarettes on the hood of their cars and stuff. But and then I look and I see there's an entity, and this is kind of where things get very familiar. Um, and there is an entity which is one of three that I was very familiar with. I'd say in the uh, waking conscious part of my life, right? That I got to know very well and fought with on a spiritual level very much while I was in my marriage. There were three spiritual attachments that he brought with him, and in addiction, those things were even more heightened, I guess you can say. Very three distinct personalities. I could see them. I know it sounds strange, but one of those was at like standing right within the tunnel in this vision and was like, hey, come on, you know me. And so here I am, and I'm like, the narrator's going on, and I'm like, this is a trick, isn't it? Like thinking to myself, this is
Was
a
the
trick.
vision, was the entity, was it in the form of your husband, or what
No,
had it taken on its own form?
No. So the three entities that, well, see, I call them attachments. Let's say, at different points throughout our marriage, like when things would get
Us.
emotionally intense, or like he would be under the influence, drugs or alcohol. And it's weird because even like different drugs would cause a different entity to appear or manifest like through him, which, I mean, that in itself in the physical is a real trip. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
very taboo to hear coming, to land on someone that's normal's ears.
Yeah.
But I think that
Yeah.
that's important to also say, because if you're not aware of the trajectory of where our world is going, and you just like take a quick look up into the sky, and
Hmm.
you hear stories of like even like otherworldly things, if you can see that like normal news stations are starting to pick that up, then you need to start paying attention to these stories,
Oh yeah.
because this is all interconnected.
It is. It is. In the spiritual realm,
Truly.
it walks hand in hand with the things that, with our physical realm. There are
It
things that
sounds
we,
crazy, but it's got to be normalized. It's got to be
yeah,
destigmatized.
yeah. I think that there have been different points in my life like, where I was kind of aware that the energy was off. I'm talking like subtle awarenesses of,
That I totally know what you're talking about, and those are red flags. It is the
yeah,
best way to look at it, and like, oh, it's like, oh, well, then you saw the red flags. It's those little subtle hints that like only, and
mhm,
you can look back on now, that God was telling you like, hey, hey,
yeah, yeah,
hey. But since we have free will, we get to make our own decisions, and then
right,
God wakes us
right.
up later.
And I found that in my experience, the more that I paid attention, and these things are not difficult. However, there's so much stuff that distracts us in life today that takes our eyes off of our own surroundings and
Quit.
the people that we interact with, the places that we go, things of the sort. We're so not aware because we're not tuned in, but we're
Hmm.
distracted. I would say that's kind of like the negative side of the spiritual world. That's what they want.
For
They
sure.
don't want us to see what they're doing.
Especially the people that claim that they're also anointed, and then the
Mhm.
narrative that they push, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is why they say the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy,
Mhm.
because of the confusion. Now,
Right,
the
right. Uh, We're
blatant, hey,
so
like
we're we're
we're
like we're so
Joe
used to
Osteen's of the
like,
world,
right.
you know.
Well, I mean, we're so used to and really trained to at this point, taking everything for face value,
Hmm.
not challenging the ideology behind that. I mean, where is that coming from? Is it based in anything to where you can actually stand on it? There's not enough why these
No.
days. It's just, yep, truth is relative. And,
And I find
you
it
know,
funny now, because like I feel like that I gaslight myself into believing that I don't have a platform, or I shouldn't share my truth because it might offend a few people that are close to me. It might
right.
make them think that for some wild reason that I'm going to hell, and like their opinion of that is really relevant to me. But dude, look at people that are standing on pulpits and doing what they're doing, and still without good conscience changing their ways, and they're still manipulating masses and masses of people into
Mm,
believing something that's going to put them. I don't know if there's a hell. I'll let you help me decide that, but putting souls in a place to where they could be in a damnation for a very long time, and not
mm,
understand how they got there, or how they even ended up there.
right, right. I feel like this really isn't a feeling. This is something that I've actually come to find out is that I was miserable a lot of my life, and that's because I didn't ask questions. I just took people's words for things and then was sorely let down over and over and over and over again. And to the point where my life depended on it. my physical life depended on finding things out for myself, learning things for myself, digging, going on, you know, these journeys to figure it out, and to prayerfully come to my own conclusions on things. I can't live by a narrative pushed by our public schools or other myself, because each one of us are so individually different and so stinking cool.
You have
And
to check people's egos and intentions and their motives. It's important.
yeah,
Motives
absolutely.
and intentions are important.
Yeah.
So you were on this rock and you saw this
Yeah.
entity and
Yes.
you identified it as an entity that you knew very well. And then
Yeah.
what happened?
Yeah. It was that familiar, like,
Artemis.
whenever you go
Right.
to a party and you don't know anybody there, but you're at a party. But then you see like a friend or, an acquaintance or something, like, hey, it's like, come on over here. Like, yeah, you know me, I know you, that kind
You
of
have
thing.
that rapport with them and it's
Yes.
kind of comforting in that
Yes.
not so space or not so safe space that you're in at that point.
Yes. Yes. And it was kind of like that. And then like there was a part of me that was like, you know better. You know better, and then the other
Mm-hmm.
part was like, it's a trap. But I decided to go anyway. And here I go. I'm like trying to not fall into this sludge. I'm like hopping on these rocks and I'm getting closer and closer to the entrance of this. I mean, it didn't look so big on the outside, but it was huge. I mean, by the time that like I walked just like a couple of steps underneath, and I was having to kind of like scale the wall to keep from
Mm-hmm.
being in the mud. And at that point, the
Wait,
entity is further and further into the tunnel. I mean, I can still see the outline and the voice, but I'm really starting to question myself, like how far do I want to go? And so I'm kind of moving at like a snail's speed, and I'm really
you were
like,
asking yourself how far do you want to go, but did you know, like, was there something in your mind and in your brain telling you that you could go as far as you wanted to?
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
it was really strange because I kept telling myself, like, I still need to be able to see the light so I know how to get out. You're like, I guess I'm just gonna keep going. It was so strange. Like the further you got in, there were like these smaller tunnels that went up, but like they were even darker. Like if you were able to get up to the point where you could like climb in there, the whole thing was so strange. It's so strange. But I could still hear that entity. It was like, come on, come on. And at one point, I remember like leaning with my back against the wall, turning back towards the opening and being like, I don't belong here. And I'm going to make my way out. And then all of a sudden, one of those like upwards tunnels, it was almost like if you move a manhole over like on a
Mhm.
city street or something, and then you're able to see light. It started to move. Like I was making my way back out, and I looked up, and it was like the sludge was coming higher. And so I was able to kind of reach up to get out, and it was only about halfway opened. And I remember reaching my hand up there, and then all of a sudden it was literally nothing but light, nothing but pure light. Mind you, it's nighttime in the vision. So like the stars out, all of this stuff, but somehow through the tunnel, there's a light that I can see. So I reach up and I'm trying to climb, but there's no like handles, there's no ladder, there's like the sludge is coming up like this. And I mean, I'm just kind of frantically like, I should have just gone out the front. Like, why
Mhm.
did I do that? Anyway, I reached up and there was literally, this is kind of where this gets even, okay, this is all weird, but it was like nothing but pure light. Literally, I mean, whitest, bright, just, and I knew I wasn't there anymore. And then all of a sudden I'm in the back of the van, but I'm staring at the bright white light, like as a star in
Mhm.
the back of the van. And this is where the other vision comes into play.
So was this the same van that you were living in?
Yes.
So that
Yep.
was the 92 van?
Yes.
Now And now you're in this van all of
Yeah.
a sudden, and
Mhm.
you see this really white, bright light.
Yeah.
And could you say that it was like driving the van?
No, no. So this
Wasn't
was,
driving it?
no, the van was still, and the star was literally, okay, so behind the driver's seat. Now, mind you, like whenever I was living in the van, we had taken the seats and everything out of the back and had put a mattress back there and some shelves and stuff to put clothes and food and stuff
Van
like that.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, but there
I
was
have
about
dreams.
a 2 foot area behind the two front seats, where it was just, the laminate flooring, where it was, you could sit behind the seats. But I just remember like sitting there, and I was behind the driver's seat, and the star, or, like, I firmly believe that that was God's presence. Like, I was staring into the face of God, but it looked like, I don't know what other words to describe it, but like a star. I
Did it
mean,
look like the Star of
yeah,
Bethlehem?
it was bright. It was
It was just
just,
really bright.
yes, it was, but I could see literally like all the way around it. It wasn't just like boom, like a spotlight coming out of nowhere. Like I could literally see almost into it, like
Hmm.
so bright. I mean, I don't think in my life I've ever seen anything like it.
But it
Anything.
was also comforting.
There was a comfort to it that I knew that that I knew I was all right. However, I knew that if I touched it, I mean, it was like I would die immediately. It, it was kind of both. I guess you can say, like,
Hmm.
I knew if it was there, I was okay. But at the same time, I knew that I couldn't get any closer physically to it. And it's strange because it was kind of emitting like almost kind of like a smoky like light, even more so like off of it. I knew that I could breathe it in the vision. In real life, I used to sit and use all the time in the back of that van, smoking fentanyl and things of the sort. And so naturally, my first idea in this vision was, oh, okay, cool. I'll just grab a straw and breathe
Wanted to
this
get high
light
off
in,
of it.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So in the vision, like I proceeded to do that, and I'm a part of this now. Just kind of having that, like I'm a part of this now. You know what I mean? It goes on from there. All of a sudden, the front seat disappears, and there's this big like playground slide that comes out of nowhere. It's like goes through the windshield, right? And it seems like all of a sudden, I don't know if he was there. I'm not aware up until this point if my ex-husband was in the van with me. But I know at this point, once the slide appears and he appears like next to me, and he's like, "We have to get out of here." And I was like, "I'm okay where I'm at. Do you not see this? This is amazing." He's like, "No, we got to get out of here. Like your life depends on it." And I just remember thinking like, I don't know how true that is. I think I'm okay with just sitting here with this. And he was like, "Okay, on the count of three, we're gonna slide down the slide, but under the star, because it was like we knew that if we touched it, it was like instant death." So we're sitting kind of like on either side of the top of the slide, kind of like this. And he's like, "Okay, one," and then he goes, and the star touches him and like cuts him in half. I mean, it was like so fast, and the top half of him like falls off of the side of the slide right there, and the bottom half slides down out, and the ending of the slide goes back to the concrete landing at the beginning of, or at the face of that tunnel bridge
Hmm.
from the previous vision.
The
Right?
concrete landing of the
Yeah.
entryway from that tunnel that
Yes.
you seen from the
Yes.
beginning of your vision.
Hmm. And so I
So he
just,
landed on that.
the bottom half of him, yes. Like
Okay.
I'd say like from the waist down, like still with the shorts and like the belt on and red Converse. I mean, it was so very, and I just remember like looking at the top half of him in the van and being like, well, I guess you made your decision. There's nothing else I can do. And then I was like,
Yeah.
well,
You saw that entity the first time. Do you think that that one of those entities was him in his physical form? Like in that, like that was like like the second one?
could have been, you know,
Like I feel like that my soul is like a sponge. You were saying it earlier. Everything that I ingest, and like I watch, sometimes I'll watch a crazy movie, and like sometimes my music is not the best, but it's all about my interpretation and my language. But I fully believe that if I'm not in a right frame of mind, or if I'm in a real fucked up mental space, that everything that I ingest will be a direct reflection of what I
yeah.
personify. So the reason I asked that was like at that point, you saw the vision of him, you know, that entity that he had taken on at some point in his life at the tunnel. That second, I'm like, what if that was like his self version? Like that was his ego. Like that was the worst part of us too. I don't know. I'm just trying to correlate because of like, it was a very irresponsible, if he said to go on the count of three and then he goes on the count of one, like there's a lot of things there that like shows a lot of irresponsibility in knowing. And like God tells us things and like the smallest vision. So I'm just trying to like think like what that part was trying to reflect, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of symbolism there, man.
Yeah. I've been chewing on this for like almost 9 months at this point.
You
Just
have a
like,
whole lifetime.
I just, why in the world?
So he's landed on this concrete slab and it's the bottom half of him, and then you very vividly point out that you just see like that bottom half of him. Where's the top half of him?
In the van,
Still in the van.
still in the van, like next to the slide at this point, like on the floor of the inside of the back of the van. Yeah.
And at that point you had accepted the fact that he was gone.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I was just almost like, is this real? But knowing it was like, that was one of the immediate like downloads. It was like, well, he made his decision. There's nothing else I can do. And I sat there with the star for what seemed like all night. And then I was like, okay, well, I guess I should go. Oh, real quick. This is what prompted me to leave the van. So out of the corner of my eye, I noticed like a glimmer, like something different. There's movement in the van. And I look up, and wrapped around the top of the roof of the van is a giant, almost like a boa constrictor. And it's got, I didn't know this at the time. This has been like trying to figure out what in the world this is. But a couple of months ago, I was looking up like, what's the deal with this? Because I dream about it a lot now. Is this giant snake just going around and around the top of the van. And it was this really like pretty purple color and had all of these like multicolored scales, and it glistened, and it was like beautiful, but I was at the same time kind of like, what if it gets like, but anyway, it turns out that the symbolism in that. Are you familiar with the Ouroboros?
No.
It's an ancient symbol of a snake eating its tail, and it's
Oh yes, yes.
symbolizes like rebirth and transformation. I saw that, and I watched it make like 3 rounds, all the way around at the top of the van. And then I was like, okay, I'm sliding out of here.
Yeah, time to go.
And I get on this slide and just like lay flat and go. And I'm on that concrete landing, and next to me is the bottom half of my ex. And I sit there and it seems like almost like a fast forwarded like time lapse of like 3 days, 3 nights. And I'm just sitting there like looking at that. I can see like the sludge coming out of the tunnel and stuff all at the same time. The night and the day is happening. And then all of a sudden I'm like, this. I push his body, like the bottom half of his body off of the concrete landing, and I stand up and like I trek up the hillside to where I can't see any of it anymore. Like I can't see any of the cars that were parked there. I couldn't see the tunnel, the bridge, anything. I just kept climbing to where it was like completely out of sight. Very strange. Very strange. I
When
think
you get
about
up
it.
on the hills, yeah, what happened with the star?
Oh, I don't know.
It
At the,
stayed there,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so you were making your way up on the hillside to just like get yourself away from having to see this.
yeah. And just, I had this deep, like, feeling like I'm never going back. I'm never going back there. I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? Like, don't want to be a part of it.
And so then you realized what, that you could do anything?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
You
I
started flying?
was like, I
Did you
guess it took
fly?
what it took.
That's
Do
what
what?
that's the way I feel. I feel like we could fly.
Oh, Jordan, this is so strange. So weird that you say that. Okay. So, okay, you're really gonna laugh. You're really gonna think that this is crazy. One of the first things that I said whenever I woke up was, I need to call my brother. And my mom was like, why? And
You
I
need
was
to
like,
call KO?
yeah. I was like, he
Okay.
needs to know. I said, he needs to know he can fly, mom. No, I know it sounds strange. And I don't mean like,
You
flapping
know
your
what's
arms
funny,
flying.
dude? You just reminded me of something. I got chills now. I went and watched the state one act play a few
Hmm.
years ago when they did it was this the girl acted like a dog. It was so good. But
Hmm.
anyways, your son was in it, but KO was there, and I was like, "What are you up to now, man?" And he was like, "I'm a geometry teacher," and I was like, looked at him, I was like, "You sure are, dude." But then I was like, "Tell me about sacred geometry," and like he just like started laughing, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this guy knows. This guy knows."
Yeah.
But yeah, that's funny that you say that because it's like KO is like very conservative vibe, but like very curious, has a very curiosity personification about him.
Yeah.
Like he's just like a curious human. That's
Oh yeah,
funny.
he's a big time learner and student at heart. And it's like
Hmm.
always wants to learn about things, and that's one of the things I admire so much about his spirit and
Yeah.
everything. It's like it can be a little thing or a big thing, but it is like the thing at the time. Like, oh, let me tell you about this that I learned, and I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's the littlest things, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's the wonder
yeah,
of it
yeah.
all.
We can't allow
Yeah.
life to turn our wonder switches off. This is
No,
real.
that's the beautiful part of waking up, bro, is
Yeah.
seeing like people hate Cedar Creek Lake, and good reason. This place can suck, and you know it is what you make it. But like, I
Mhm.
ask people, I'm like, "Have you seen the sunset? Like, when's the last time that you like
Oh, it's
actually went
beautiful.
outside and like looked at the sunset here,
Mhm.
or just drove into the woods and like let the trees encompass you? Like,
Yes.
when's the last time you done something like that?" And it's like, never or a long time. Why don't you go do that and then like
Yeah.
realize how beautiful this place is, man? It's the
Yeah.
littlest things. I see a deer and I'm like, oh my God, that's a deer.
Yeah.
Part of me real feels like I might be turning into like I'm taking on that dad part of me, like the dad version, like where the jokes are really dry and like I'm like, hey, there's a bald eagle on the tree. The other part of me is like the wonderment of like having that experience with God and then
Yeah.
seeing that what's in that is in me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. We are nature.
hmm
How
that
cool.
energy is driven. My dogs have a little ball of energy within them that drives
Yeah.
them. And I'm like, that's me.
Yeah.
That's me. I can learn so much from that littlest aspect.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
back to this flying thing, man. You mentioned that you started to realize everything, and
Mm-hmm.
you asked me if I was familiar with string theory, and I don't think anybody can be familiar with string theory on a like an intellectual basis because
Yeah.
no one
Yeah.
really knows what it is. But I think about it like this. All right, I'm going to take my vape because it's relatable. Everybody has a vape. But this vape had to be created.
Right.
So like it's made of plastic, obviously, but it had to start with like a little minuscule piece of plastic. And
Mm-hmm.
so then I think about that little bitty piece of plastic and I'm like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what about, like then I'm breaking it down even smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm like, all right, dude, like, where did anything come from? Like, where is objects manifested, or like, where are things created and how are things created? And it's like, it has to be from the touch of God. It has to be
Yeah.
from that fog that makes you feel like that you want to inhale it. Like,
Yeah.
and it sounds crazy, but the fact that you're even here is crazy. The
Yeah.
fact that we go through the things that we do, the fact that we dream, the fact that some of us don't dream. Some of us just go to sleep and then wake right back up and it's 6 a.m. in the morning and
Mm-hmm.
it was just 10 p.m. No one thinks about that.
Yeah.
But like, that's crazy. That's all
Yeah.
crazy. And nobody is talking about it. They're just waking up, getting their coffee, complaining about their lives, and really creating the reality that they're perpetuating. And
Right.
it's like, well, no wonder you can't see the miracle in it all because you're so wrapped up in all of this that you don't have time to open up your heart and mind to see that, like, the person that did have the drug overdose, yeah, their their rap's not the greatest, their credibility's not the greatest. Hell, I have 9 arrests, like, but you prayed for me. You
Yes.
prayed for me when I was at my lowest, and now, like, you can accept that maybe God answered those prayers.
Mm,
Why? Because you're
yeah.
so fogged up and cloud-minded that, like, you don't realize that God called the people that were broken. It's not going to be the people that have it all together, that have all the answers, that just miraculously have the greatest lives. It's not going to be those people that are going to change the narrative of society of what God wants and what God needs and what
Mm-hmm.
God yearns from us. And that's unadulterated connection, unconditional love. He gives us those things to give and to return, and people reject that. When people reject that now, like when I'm like being who I am and like I'm seeing people's body language and like I'm really going off of the energy that I'm projecting, and then someone comes back and it's real shallow, I'm like, that's not God. That's definitely something of evil nature. That's not wholesome. The more that I'm told I'll never amount to anything, or the things that I see or the things that come to fruition in my life aren't real, the more that that's projected from certain people, the more that I realize that when you look at it, their lives are really chaotic and really bad, and they're really discontented, and their spiritual nature is just really effed up. And it's like,
Yeah.
you're projecting that on me because you see light in me. You see
Mm-hmm.
that the aura is different. You see that God's working in my life. And so now you're projecting this on me because it's very easy to discern now what's of good and what's of evil nature. is what I'm
Right.
trying to say, based
Right.
off of what I've experienced.
And what's just like stuck in repetition? People who have thought the same way their whole life and they're just stuck in that cycle.
Yeah,
There's
I see
no
it.
like challenge. And so what I'm finding on this side of that event, the more time that's gone on, the more I find it one of my biggest challenges today is feeling like I'm making any kind of like real connection with people. And I think a big part of that, and I'm not trying to sound like hyper spiritual or, or egotistical or any way like that. I'm trying to, say like what, I've found very challenging since all of that is, trying to connect with people on a level like I did before. And I feel like now that, I'm able to discern on a different level, it makes interpersonal relationships very challenging because, my first reaction is, I'm not engaging with that. I'm not
You
entertaining
love
that.
yourself differently now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And so it's just like,
You
they would,
experience love in a way that's different.
yeah, it's just
It's
like,
very
say
hard.
what you want, or, hold that opinion or hold that idea. But if you're going to reject, like, if you're going to project from your place of fear or your place of deficit or your place of cycles of behavior and thinking and everything, I'm just like, I'm going to let you work that out.
Mhm.
you know? And so, where I feel like, I can look back and say, I can count on one hand the amount of, friends that I still talk to, you know what I mean? Like that I've had for a really long time. And most of those are blood related. And it's not, I feel like over the years, like I've moved so many places, I've been I've done so many things and I've made like so many connections and acquaintances and friends and all of it. And I used to feel like at any given point I could talk to any of them and I have all these friends and my life is so rich and full and all of this stuff. And now it's like, and I really struggle with that idea. And it's not that I don't or can't, attain meaningful connection these days in my life. I'm just saying like it takes a whole lot more thought and a whole lot more process and a whole lot more like really scoping it out and really evaluating like, is this even worth, the rest of my time here? Like I know and understand like there are things coming that if the people that I have in my life are not
Gosh,
ignorant to just be like, hey, rock and roll. I went through detox probably no less than 30 times. I went through like long-term rehabs. I mean, I've been to several, probably a dozen at least. And then, on my own, I've tried to detox and stay clean on my own accord and my own volition countless times. They're inpatient. I have been through 3 times, and then the last time they told me I was not allowed to come back.
yeah.
I ruffled some
The
feathers
treatment's funny.
there.
My next guest is going to be, she has a master's in she has her LCDC and she's the clinical director. It's called Harmony Road out of El Paso.
Oh, awesome.
And like, I really don't know her. One of my buddies linked me up with her and he's like, bro, please, like, don't go, like, treatment's bad. But like, I don't think treatment's bad at all, but I think it's when you get felt like that I can't go back here. This isn't no more a lifeline for me.
Yeah.
While it does change my attitude and idea in that point in hindsight, I don't know if that would have been the best thing to tell me at that point.
Right.
Like, ever making me feel like I cut off a resource is a dangerous thing to do to addicts, especially when we're seeking connections and we personalize everything.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But you were talking about where your relationships now and how you go about it. And the reason I asked about treatment was because everything that I was taught in treatment was kind of the curriculum was there, but like everything that I was taught in treatment didn't become relevant until for some reason I started living it. And
Mhm.
like the boundaries thing, the warning signs, the triggers, all those things were like me saying words for a very long time and putting it on paper, but never enacting it. Now, for instance, one of my warning signs is I'm allergic to cats, deathly. And I'll go into someone's house, I have to go take an allergy pill. Well, my little allergy pill looks like a little Xanax football. And I'm like, I live a normal life, and I'll pop out an allergy pill, and I'm like, "Oh, that looks like a Xanax." And I'm like, that's a warning sign and like a trigger. And like the boundaries thing, was so effed up for me because like they kept teaching me boundaries and how to have healthy boundaries, but I wasn't learning how to have healthy boundaries with myself. I wasn't learning like how to truly take care of myself and tell myself no, like when it was very easy to tell myself yes, like go with those people, like they have the resources you need, do it. Like I didn't have no boundaries for myself. And so when I realized I was only treating myself like people treat me, then it changed. So like your connections changed, but I think that your relationship with yourself changed too, most importantly. Like you started to truly care and have a love for yourself like God loves you. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And so like I look on it now, I don't have a relationship with my sister. I try with my mom. My mom's not in a really good mental space, so she has a very childlike demeanor, which is I I might have had something to do with that in my addiction, but I don't blame myself for anything. And that's not me being selfish. That's me again, like personal boundaries. I didn't create none of this. I have to take care of me, but the boundaries, I had to create boundaries with my mom, and then I had to create boundaries with my sister, and their reaction was, I'm bad. I'm the bad person now. Have y'all seen how much of an asshole Jordan is? Like, and I don't know what my sister even like says about me because like I haven't talked to her in like 3 years. But I do know that if she were asked about me, there's nothing good that she's gonna say about me. And the funny thing about boundaries is the boundaries were created for me, and like your actions and how you are is probably a good reason why those boundaries were put in place to begin with. I started to only accept a certain level of disrespect from myself at a certain point in my life. Then I didn't even allow that, and then I didn't allow this. And it wasn't me becoming self-righteous. It became me embodying what God was showing me of how to love myself and take care of myself. And unfortunately for us, depending on people's opinions, God had to set us on our ass to show us that. And have you looked up other people's near-death experiences?
No, I mean, I've done a little bit of reading on, like the medical side of it. Yeah, because I had so many questions coming out of that. I was like, was I dead? Like, but I mean, I knew what I had experienced and what I had seen and everything during that time period. However, I can't account for what was going on physically during that time. And so it's been a lot of, my mom followed the care flight. She was there within like 20, 30 minutes of the helicopter landing. My cousin flew in from Oklahoma. We were raised pretty much like sisters. Her and my other cousin, but she flew in from Oklahoma and was there 4 out of the 5 days, and her and my mom, stood guard and kept an eye on me and talked to the doctors um and everything. And it's so crazy. Like, I mean, my uncle that I haven't seen in several years, came to visit, and was like talking to me. Like I had zero awareness or recollection of all of these people coming to my room. My ex father-in-law and mother-in-law were there. I mean, just all of the things. And there's been a lot that I've been filled in on, oh, well, this happened on this day and this happened on this day. And then they tried this and your doctors really weren't hopeful. And we didn't want to, call in, call the kids and tell them like mom may not make it home from the hospital until they knew for sure. It was a lot going on. I felt pretty overwhelmed coming home from the hospital because I still had like so many questions. I didn't understand why I was on a ventilator in the first place. I didn't understand what in the world could have taken place, could have transpired from the time that I came to a rolling stop in that parking lot to getting shot with a nail gun in my leg, what it felt like in the back of an ambulance. And then all of a sudden I'm waking up and my mom's crying next to me, and there's all of this, what seems like physical lost time, that I can't account for. However, I knew where I went. I knew all the places I went in those 5 days on a different level. But coming home after the hospital, mom and dad brought me to their house and to heal, because I mean I could barely walk. For some reason, like my left leg, I couldn't feel it for like 3 months, and had trouble, walking, getting up out of bed, walking by myself, without like falling over. But I had to depend a lot on my parents to help me, physically. Like I couldn't take a shower by myself for almost the first month. And these are, it was like really difficult. And so, to kind of seek some kind of comfort, I was looking up like how to heal faster from being on life support, like how to make my body catch up with my brain, because like it's not. What happens in the process of you not breathing and dying and then being medically brought back to life and being on a machine? What happens? I was really kind of like, and then kind of taking that in of like, this has happened to me. And this was choices that I made and decisions that I made and things that I did that got me to this point. And so it was a whole lot of really kind of coming to terms with things. And like I said, the spiritual side of this has just been like unparalleled. Like there's not a whole lot of figuring that out. I know I'm different. I know
that
now.
you're different too. Yeah.
Like,
There's people that are waking up and like, that's what's crazy is like people are waking up and like there's different ways that they're waking up. But like, for instance, okay, this is crazy. I got out of treatment and I got into this Cinecor outpatient group because my buddy was running the group and he wanted me to be a part of the group. So I get in the group and I tell him where I'm from. And it just so happens that there's a girl that lives right behind me here in Trinidad that's in the group. She has a son named Braden. She's the same age as me. Very, very distinctive similarities. Same, like everything. Her son's the same age as Braden.
What?
It was wild. Well, I befriended her and we became homies and stuff. And one night she calls me and she's like, Jordan. And I'm like, what's up? And she's like, you don't see those lights in your window, bro? And I'm like, no. And I'd send you screenshots of the conversation. She's like, dude, there's like a car in your backyard. And I'm like, let me get up. My dogs aren't barking or anything.
Yeah.
So I get up and I'm like, why are you messing with me? There's nothing happening in my backyard. And so she sends me a picture and there's like 3 orbs in my backyard. And I'm like, what the heck? But the thing about it is like when I met Carissa, I just knew that something was different about her. She astral projects. I
Mhm.
know that sounds crazy, but
It
like she does
doesn't.
astral
It really doesn't.
projection, like she goes and travels in people's dreams and travels in her dreams.
Mhm.
She believes in aliens and like she was waking up, bro. How could I not see for what was happening around me? Another person, Heather, I call her or Heather Regina. It's what
Yeah,
she's.
yeah.
I'm not very good friends with her, but I've had her on my podcast and
Uh-huh.
I've been on her podcast. She's had a spiritual experience to like where everything that she's speaks on
Uh-huh.
now are things that like God's shown me too.
Yeah.
And so like I seen her and like I didn't have a very big relationship with her growing up, but
Uh-huh.
now like it's a real profound connection that I have with her. And now you having, you know, the what you went through
Uh-huh.
and the things that you've seen, I'm like, oh my,
Yeah.
people are waking up.
Yeah.
We're waking up, and the people that I always felt like glowed and had something about them, these are the people that are waking up with like real profound truths.
Yeah.
And like now people that I didn't even know in my life are coming in like with real profound truths. It's undeniable that the connections, and you're like, well, that's a coincidence. Oh, you got to stop drawing so many coincidences and realize, hey man, God's laying this on your heart, so it's up to you to share it.
Yeah.
And that's where you're at, because I remember seeing you go live at a certain point in time, like you were in ministry and like you have the voice of an angel, man. You just sing and like you can sing really, really beautifully. And I'm like, oh my God, she's being called. Like she's got it. In hindsight now, it's like, duh. Like these people, like we all went through these experiences, very traumatic
Uh-huh.
experiences too. And now we're seeing the other side of that experience and like what God has shown us from that.
Yeah.
And it's not the narrative that we were taught growing up. And I think it's important to say, you know, where does your spirituality lie at now? Like after everything that's happened, like how do you go about with your connection and like what is your perception of God now?
I would say my entire life it was like I was aware of God's existence. That I believed that God God loves me, but I don't think that I really like fully understood that. And at this point, it's I know that God is real. I know I know that he's with me and around me all the time. That he does have plans and purpose for my life. When it comes down to, religion and all of these things, I don't really find much purpose in aligning with with a certain, religion or title or anything of that sort because I know that God is who he is and um and that Jesus is who he is. like and that there's with the time that we have, there's no point in arguing like little things or, having denominational divide and religious divide and all of that stuff. It's irrelevant. I hate to say it
And
like
I
that.
think
But
it is.
it's all pretty
I think
irrelevant because
about
it's
it,
all
man.
so much like man fueled. If we can just be big enough to open our eyes and just see each other for what we are, and it's God's handiwork
Hmm.
that He's placed
Yeah.
s- like special and very specific things in each of us that when we can see that in each other despite our differences, despite our beliefs and opinions and all of that can go away. It's like when we get to a point where we can realize that working together and having that connection with creation and with God, the better that this experience becomes. It's like we're able to fuel each other. we're able to, come alongside and, like encourage one another, to continue. And it's kind of the beauty of it. Yeah. Or I
Yeah.
was so confused and, believing some of this theology and believing some of that and just all over the place before all of this. Like I've kind of come to find that not majority of it doesn't really matter. Like all the crap that separates us.
Right.
We should
And
always look for what brings us together. And the one thing that we all have in common is that we were created by God for his purposes. And life is beautiful, man.
it is. And I think that one thing that we can all relate on is the fact that, like, there's two things that we can feel that every human feels, and that's love and hate.
Mhm.
And when we realize that there's a duality in that, and I think back on, like, I got really big on Taoism
Mhm.
this last time I went to treatment. I think about the duality of love and hate, and then I correspond that to the yin yang
Mhm.
and the black and the white of the yin yang. But at a certain point in that yin yang, the love and the hate have to connect.
Mhm.
And so when I realized that I couldn't have love without first understanding the gravity of hate
Yeah.
and how much hate was inflicted on me from another human, that
Uh-huh.
I could also channel the opposite of that. Because
Yeah.
again, science, the things that I've been taught really showed me that I couldn't it's never created nor destroyed, it was only transferred.
Mhm.
Then I started transferring that all that hateful energy into a real intentional, almost sarcastic like love at first. Like, you know, if this hate thing is like so profound and people can make names off of themselves so fast off of just hateful intentions,
Mhm.
then love has to be the opposite of that, and it takes a lot longer to achieve it. It's patient. It's an evolving thing. It's something that you have to encompass and build up. Whereas, like, the opposite of that was just very quick, decisive.
Mhm.
I can get whatever I wanted right here and now based
Right.
off of hate. And so that duality, like when I started channeling love, I realized everybody feels this.
Yeah.
So what if we just forgot that we could have hate? What if we just completely blocked that and just intentionally lived in love?
Yeah.
And I started doing that, and the the connections, the synchronicities, the way that God shows up in my life. I work as a mover, and it's a very humbling job, and I
Mhm.
like working as a mover because of the things that God has shown me, because then I'll get to like have a connection with somebody. I'm just a mover, man. That's all I am. I'm just a mover. Um but two different times. The first time was I work with a guy that is very he's a Christian, but he's been taught a lot like we've been taught, Southern Baptist, just a certain way of living, very much against gay rights, things like that,
Mhm.
just a very conservative
Mhm.
Christian. But I love people like this
Yeah.
because I'm not a conservative Christian. I'm a very just a free will, easygoing, let's just be in a flow state type
Right.
person, and let's watch things happen. So we're coming off, and I've shared this story before. We're in Dallas, man, and we get stopped in front of this liquor store, and there's this homeless man out there picking up trash in front of this liquor store. And this guy pulls up in this real nice Range Rover, and he has this big old pizza, walks by the homeless man with his pizza, and it stops the homeless man in his tracks, as it probably would have stopped me in my tracks too. It was a big pizza.
Mhm.
And the guy walks into the liquor store. Well, that homeless man follows that guy into the liquor store, and I look at my buddy Quentin, who's, very conservative Christian, and I was like, look, man, if that guy comes out of that store with the pizza, man, you can't deny that the God that I believe in is real.
Mhm.
So, like, we're sitting there, and like, I already know this guy's coming out with pizza. Like, I believe in manifesting things, so
Mhm.
like I'm manifesting this guy to come out with this pizza. This homeless man walks out, and he has this freaking plate of pizza, And I start crying
Oh,
because, man, this has really happened. But not only did that happen, but like in traffic, he looks directly at Quentin and I and chunks up the deuce at us
oh
like,
wow.
hey. And I'm like, yo, it was like I'd like became good at football for once and I scored a touchdown. I
Yeah.
was like so hyped, like, yo, I told you, bro. I
Yeah.
try to tell you. And he's like, yeah, man, like that's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. You know, I'm not trying to dumb down Quentin or anything,
Yeah.
but like
Hey, it's
I
okay.
had
We're all
gotten
from
to
the
a
lake.
point. I was like, yeah, I was like, he's like, oh, that's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But then like this other thing happened because I I'm a spiritual person. Like I believe that like if there is intention behind it, then it
Mm-hmm.
can be powerful. My ex-wife was very energy draining. She was manipulative in hindsight now, but she was a witch, bro. She was a practicing witch, like
Mm-hmm.
had spell jars in her house, in our house, the whole 9 yards, fully decked out in this stuff. So she had these crystals
Mm-hmm.
and she wanted these crystals after we divorced. And I'm like, no, you can't have these crystals because I know that you've been like putting spells on people and then charging these crystals. And I'm like, we're not doing that anymore. Like, it's stopping here. I even took the crystals and like held them close to my heart under a full moon and was like, I don't know what to do here, but like, I know that these were like charged with something, but not love. So like now, like, even voiced it. I said, I'm charging these crystals with the intention of love.
Mm-hmm.
I did that like this summer.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I'm buddy, yeah, man, I got these crystals, dude. Pretty crazy. He's like, dude, you're insane, man. He's like, there's no way. I was like, well, what if I told you that I've been carrying a crystal in my bag this entire time? Like, he's like, you're like, what are you doing, bro? I was like, dude, it's all about the intention. It's about what your motives are. If I carried this crystal or this rock with the intention of love and like the intention of changing the world,
Mm-hmm.
well then my thought is that gives me power, bro. That's it. That's literally it. You live in fear, and so it's the same thing. It's what we make of it.
Right.
But we go to this house, and there's this old lady, and we had been debating about spirituality and Christianity, and we get into this house, and this lady goes, "Y'all want to see the biggest crystal ever?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "I'm a spiritual Christian." I didn't prompt this lady to say this. I didn't like nothing had happened beforehand. Like that was her exact line. She looked at Quentin and said, "I'm a spiritual Christian." And I looked at Quentin and I said, "That lady didn't tell you that, bro. That was God telling you. Open your mind a little bit."
Yeah.
And we unloaded the biggest amethyst I'd ever seen in my life. Like it was like 175 pounds.
Holy
It was in
crap.
this wooden crate and it was massive. I thought it was the funniest thing ever because here we are debating over, our stupidity, like, oh yeah, Christianity. And then like out of nowhere, this lady just like comes into our lives and's like, I'm a spiritual Christian and like this is what I believe. It doesn't matter what y'all believe. Go unload my crystals. And like God has a sense of humor.
Yeah.
God's gonna if we are on our path and we have a way, God's going to try to keep us on that path and on that way as much as he can afford us to allow us to based off of our own decision making.
Yeah.
And I think right now what Quentin is starting to see, like the God that he grew up with is probably a lot different than the God that dwells within us.
Mm-hmm.
And that conviction is happening,
Yeah.
but it's happening across I think that we were starting to be convicted way before you even had your overdose. I think that I was being called way before I begged my probation officer to lock me up and put me in jail. Like there's a long time ago, I felt like that maybe if I would have answered the call then, now in hindsight, now my experience wouldn't be what it was. So I
Right.
can't say that it's important,
Yeah.
but I feel like that I was being called a lot longer than what I was.
Yeah.
It's just now it is what it is, and now that everything is coming, it had to be that way because of the narrative that's been pushed.
Yeah.
What we believe God to be is not what God truly is.
Right. The
I
Bible
think
does
God.
the Bible does say, I think it's in Isaiah, he says, and in those days I will pour my spirit out upon all men. That's men and women, right? And your older men will dream dreams, and your younger ones will have visions. And I think about that a lot. I know, like, in my own experience, like, I've had a lot of head knowledge for a really long time, you know, had a lot of head knowledge about, who I believed that God was and what that meant for me, and the narrative, that I was taught growing up and things of the sort. It wasn't until, experience kicked in, and living through, years of trial, living years of, you know, hills and valleys and mountaintops and everything, and being able to really kind of reflect on those times and then look at today for what it is. It does take time, I think, for the head knowledge to drop down and really become heart knowledge for practical
Hmm.
application. And I think that there's another level of awareness that comes when that happens. And I feel like it's a constant thing. It's like it's a continual process that happens, but it's like the more open and aware that we are that that's taking place, I think the more that we're able to operate in that on a daily basis and pay more attention to the things going on around us and be more aware of the things that we do, the things that we say. Um, and be more intentional about it. How it works in AA, it says we will not regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. And I can't tell you, for the longest time in my life, there were so many regrets that I had and so many people, places, and things that I just wanted to erase, shut the door on, not ever think about it again, pretend nothing ever happened, nothing
Hmm.
ever took place. It's
Yeah.
fine, like all
Same.
fine. you know but the more that I find is that, like, yeah, we have experienced a lot of trauma, we've experienced a lot of hate, we've experienced a lot of trials, and whether that be of our own doing or outside of ourselves, the process is the process, and we have to really learn to accept and love all the things that happen. Because I mean, really and truly, I know it sounds cliche, but we wouldn't be where we are today with our eyes open the way that they are and have the
Hmm.
experiences that we have that are vital to continue to fuel the fire to keep us going every day.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's great to end on. I'm so proud of you and proud of your journey. I'm sitting here listening to you speak, and like it's hard to believe that like you're 9 months away from like the worst part of your life. I'm 5 years into this, and I feel like I'm speaking to somebody that's been living this life for like 30 years, been on this journey, and it just seems like the the spiritual nature, the maturity of your spirit, man, is undeniable now. Like with people like us, the people that are closest to us, there's always a fear of us going back out and relapsing or something bad happening in our lives, and our response to flee or to go and use again. And like that's different here. Like
yeah,
you can feel like
yeah,
there's not an anxious energy. There's like a knowing of like we're gonna have another experience where I'm probably gonna get frustrated and I'm probably gonna come out of and act on self, but I'm not gonna get high.
yeah,
I'm not gonna flee and connect to those feelings and emotions with the substance to take my pain away because of everything that I've gone through now.
yeah,
And that's something that you don't even have to say, Aubrey. That's something that is in your spirit and in your aura and how you walk. Like I said, from when we first started, my buddy reached out to me and was like, "Hey, dude, you need to have Aubrey on." And I'm like, "I know, man. There's something different, and there's something different about us. People see it, but people don't want to. They're like, "Who? What is that?" Like that. That's not
I think
that's
our
not
wonder
even
switch
off.
might have gotten turned back on. I call it the wonder switch. I think the wonder switch got turned back on. Ain't nobody got time
Yeah,
for all that relapse crap.
we don't. And I think
For
it's
the bird.
important to like have when we listen, because this lady that's the counselor, she wants to use one of that story that I had about Mr. Staten in group. What I really want for people to understand that's early on in treatment is like, for one, it's not about the time that you have sober. It's about the experience that you're having while you're in recovery. It doesn't matter if it's a day, it doesn't matter if it's an hour. If you're actively trying to be in recovery, that's just as much as 5 years as it is 10 minutes.
Right.
There's no different. The important part is loving yourself.
Right.
And understanding that love for yourself way sooner in your recovery, and not, and not having to go back out and find it in something else. You got to find it there. You got to find that genuine love and passion and fire that's brought you to this point, but you still can't understand it. We got to get people's switches flipped there, and like get the recidivism rate up, because if people understood how you feel, and if people understood how I feel that are in treatment right now, they wouldn't go back to treatment after this.
Right.
With the spirituality and the Christ consciousness, and how we live our lives and the vibration, I promise you, if you could just understand this experience and understand these feelings and emotions that you have earlier on, you won't go back. There's nothing worth getting high over again. I
Right.
mean, I'm fully big on natural medicine. I'm fully big on the psychedelic realm. I'm fully big on alternative medicine, but I was also like using that as an excuse too at one point in time, because of the fact that I was just trying to disconnect from my own feelings and emotions.
Right.
But I realized that the worst part of me, the worst things that I'd done, was still an act of love for me to be who I am today.
Yeah.
Regardless of what my ego and myself tell me of how embarrassing that may be or how fucked up it may be, that was still an act to show that I could love myself as much as I do today.
Yeah.
And so I had to have that experience to understand that.
Right. Right. It has to
And so
happen the
keep
way it
going,
has to
bro.
happen.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do this again.
Yeah, let's do.
Yeah.